This tutorial will cover APA writing style. Specifically, we'll look at both in-text and reference list citations and explore the 4 basic components of a citation. Formatting in APA has a few specific guidelines. This includes using a 12-point font size and Times New Roman typeface. If you're using quotations, they should be set apart with quotation marks, or if the quote is 40 or more words, use a block quote format. You should always maintain double spacing for your paragraphs and use 1-inch margins all the way around. In-text citations in APA follow the author date format, meaning that the date always follows the author's last name. References should be organized alphabetically with a hanging indent. And if you are asked to include a title page, the information on that page should appear on the top half. Page numbers are always placed in the upper right-hand corner of each page. And a running header is used, but you only can use 50 characters, and that includes the spacing. In scientific and college writing, a sound organizational structure is the key to clear, precise, and logical communication. Headings effectively organize ideas and help readers anticipate key points and track the development of your argument. The heading style recommended by APA consists of 5 possible formatting arrangements. Each section in a paper will begin with the highest level of heading, level 1, and then follow the same top-down progression to level 2, level 3, and so on. A note of caution: the introduction portion of your paper does not carry a heading that labels it introduction. The first part of a paper is assumed to be the introduction. If your paper only needs 1 level of heading, use only level 1. For a paper with 2 levels of heading, use levels 1 and 2. And if your paper requires 3 levels of heading, use levels 1, 2, and 3, and so on. Levels 1 and 2 are the only headings that are separated from the text of your paper. Levels 3, 4, and 5 essentially look like a sentence or a sentence fragment that begin a paragraph. Chapter 4 of the APA manual covers all aspects of the mechanics of writing. There's a lot of information in Chapter 4, and you should consult the manual for a full description of the content. APA has guidelines on how and when to use punctuation marks, such as the period, comma, semicolon, colon, dash, quotation marks, both double and single quotation marks, parentheses, brackets, and the slash. There are capitalization practices specific to APA style, such as the capitalization of proper nouns in trade names, titles of tests, and names of conditions or groups in an experiment. And there are also times to use italics to emphasize something in your paper, as well as abbreviations. Chapter 4 also covers ways to note numbers expressed as numerals or as words, decimal fractions, and plurals of numbers, as well as statistical and mathematical copy, such as effective presentation, when to provide formulas, statistical symbols, and the spacing and alignment of those symbols, and when and how to display equations. You may be familiar with another writing style, such as MLA or Chicago. APA is used for social science disciplines, including nursing, psychology, business, education, and information sciences. APA is unique in that it utilizes the last name initial format for authors to help overcome gender bias in publishing and scientific writing. Also, APA's in-text citation format provides instant information to the reader, enabling the reader to know what sources were used or who said a particular quotation at the point of encounter. The reader doesn't have to stop and flip to the end or look at the bottom of the page for additional information. In this next section, we will look at elements of crediting sources within the body of your paper. We'll explore how to determine when to cite a source, how to format the in-text citation, what to do with multiple sources and multiple authors, as well as reiterate how to indicate quotations. This decision tree demonstrates how to determine if you need to provide a citation for a passage. Beginning with the first question, is it a quote? Is the section you're considering a quotation? If so, you must cite it and include a page or paragraph number. If the passage is not a quotation, go to the next question. Is it a paraphrase? If you paraphrased information, you will still need to cite it, but you do not have to provide a page or paragraph number. If the passage is neither a quotation nor a paraphrase, ask, is it an idea that someone else wrote about? If it is, then you'll need to cite it as well. If the passage is not a quotation or a paraphrase or someone else's idea, but instead it's your own idea or words, then you do not need to cite that passage. Here are 3 examples of an in-text citation for a paraphrase. In-text citations come in 2 forms. Parenthetical, meaning the author, date, and page numbers are inside parentheses, or non-parenthetical, meaning the author's name is outside of parentheses. You may notice throughout the remainder of this presentation that in APA, almost everything is determined by the author's name. The first example here shows the non-parenthetical format. The sentence begins with the author's last name and is immediately followed by the date of publication. This is the author-date format. The second and third examples are both parenthetical because the author's name is inside the parentheses. The placement of the in-text citation is different between these 2 examples. Determine where to place the in-text citation based on what information came from the source. In the second example, the reader can assume that all of the information contained in the first half of the sentence is a paraphrase of Cottrell's 2008 source, and that the second half of the sentence is the voice of the present author. However, in the third example, we can assume that the entire sentence is a paraphrase of Cottrell's 2008 source. When multiple sources have been paraphrased or multiple sources contributed to your idea, alphabetize the list and separate each resource with a semicolon. In this example, 3 sources were used or paraphrased. Those 3 sources were articles by Adams in 2011, Birch in 1996, and Egan's in 2004. It does not matter that Birch's article was published first or that Adams's article was published more recently. What matters when determining the format of this in-text citation is the author's last name. The proper order is Adams, 2011, semicolon, Birch, 1996, semicolon, Egan's, 2004. Notice you use semicolons and you do not use the word and. There are a few subtle formatting rules for quotations. Remember that a quotation will either begin or end with an in-text citation, and you must always indicate a quotation with quotation marks and a page number or paragraph number. If a quotation is 40 or more words, indicate this to your reader by separating the quotation in a block format. The entire block should be indented on the left margin, and you do not need to use quotation marks. When the sources you use have more than one author, there are different ways to display the authors for an in-text citation. Refer to the APA manual in Chapter 6 for a complete description of displaying multiple authors of a single work. This slide provides a general overview of how the in-text citation will change based on the number of authors. If a single source, such as an article, has 1 or 2 authors, each time you cite this resource, you will also spell out the authors' names. The example in yellow shows both the parenthetical and non-parenthetical format. If a single source has 3 to 5 authors, you will spell out all of the authors' names the first time you cite them. Then only provide the first author's name, followed by et al., each subsequent time you cite that same resource. For example, the first time we cite an article by Beck, Connor, and Smith, all 3 authors are listed. But the second, third, 4th time we cite this same article, only Beck's name appears, followed by et al. Also note that when multiple authors appear in the parenthetical format, the word and is indicated by the symbol ampersand. But in the non-parenthetical format, use the word and rather than the symbol. Finally, if a single work has 6 or more authors, you only need show the first author's name every time you cite this work. The first author's last name will always be followed by et al. In this last section, we will cover the format of citations in a reference list. The reference list appears at the end of your paper and will be double-spaced. Reference citations in APA format use a hanging indent style. This means that the first line of the citation begins on the left margin, but all subsequent lines of that same citation will be indented 1 tab space to the right. A reference list includes all the sources you cited in the body of your paper. Each in-text citation should have a supporting reference citation. Likewise, Each reference citation must have at least one in-text citation. Items that should be excluded from a reference list are resources that you did not cite in the body of your paper. In many cases, you will read sources that you do not cite in your document. These sources may lead you to other articles, or they may have provided some guidance, but in typing up the paper, you did not actually utilize this information to the point that you needed to cite it. Therefore, exclude those items from the reference list. Also, if you interviewed people as part of your research, you will note that in the body of your paper as personal communication, but those personal communications should not appear in the reference list. The reason is that the items in your reference list should be attainable by the reader, and conversations are not typically retrievable. In the following slides, we will focus on the 4 basic parts of a reference citation in detail. The 4 parts are author, date, title, and publication information. All reference citations have these components. It's the way they appear that will be different. Authors are noted by last name and initials. The order is the same no matter which position an author appears. In other words, the first author will be listed last name initial, and the second will be last name initial, and the third the same, and so on. The specific format is last name, comma, initial, period, initial, period. If there are multiple authors for the same work, place an ampersand symbol ahead of the final author and separate all the authors by a comma. If no author is listed and no byline is provided, then you move the title of the resource to the first position. Avoid inserting the word anonymous unless the byline specifically attributes the work to anonymous. In other words, don't substitute the term anonymous for an unsigned work. The date field is the second of the 4 basic elements in a reference citation. The date always appears in the second position. Most often, the only date included in a reference citation is the year, and it is always wrapped in parentheses and ends with a period. If a resource is published monthly or bi-monthly, include both the year and month in the date field. If a resource is published weekly or daily, such as a newspaper, include the year, month, and day. If the month is included, spell that out as a complete word. If you use a resource that does not have a publication date posted, such as on a web page, use the abbreviation for no date, which is N.D. The title of a work is in the third position of the citation. However, if there's no author, move the title to the first position. A title will appear in one of 2 ways, either in italics or not. If the title's for a major work, such as a complete book, or a website, or a brochure, or a report, all things that stand alone, the title will be in sentence case and italicized. Sentence case is where the first word is capitalized, but all other words are lowercase. The exception is in the case of proper nouns, names, cities, and product names. In the case of a reference citation, you will use sentence case for both the title and the subtitle of the work. If the title is for a minor work, such as a book chapter, a web page, a journal article, or a newspaper article, do not italicize the title of that item. On the next 2 slides, you will see some examples of major and minor titles. This slide shows 2 works, a report and a book. The report's title is Medicare and You, 2013. Notice the sentence case is used for the title. Only the first word is capitalized. On the book, notice the sentence case for both the title, Exceptional Children, and the subtitle, An Introduction to Special Education. The edition of the book is set apart inside of parentheses, is not italicized, and uses the abbreviation for edition, which is lowercase e, d, and period. On this slide is an example of a book chapter, which is considered a minor title because it is inside of a larger work. The title of the chapter is not italicized, but it still uses sentence case formatting. When you create a citation for a book chapter or a journal article, for example, you will indicate that the title is inside of the larger work. Notice the statement in J.B. Crockett, B. Billingsley, and M.L. Bosgarden's Handbook of Leadership and Administration for Special Education, and that the chapter we're citing can be found on pages 3 through 16 of that book. Also, make note of the shift in capitalization between the minor title and major title of the book. and note that the role of Crockett, Billingsley, and Boscarden are indicated as editors by the abbreviated capital EDS. The final element of a reference citation is the publication information. This part will look different depending on the type of work you're citing. For example, books, brochures, and other standalone items will have a city and state and a publisher name. Always include both the city and the two-letter state abbreviation. If an item was published in London, for example, you would write the city and country as London, England. The publication information for an article, whether in a journal, magazine, or newspaper, will consist of the name of the journal or magazine, the volume and issue number, and the page numbers on which the article appears. If you're using a website or web page or other electronically published item, the URL or web address acts as the publication information. On this slide, you'll see some additional examples of what you might include in the publication information. If both the author and publisher are the same company, instead of rewriting the company name in both fields, simply place the word author in the publication field to indicate to the reader that the author and the publisher are in fact the same. If an item includes a DOI, or digital object identifier, you will include the DOI after the other publication information. In the second example, the journal article also has a DOI, and that information will appear after the journal name, volume, issue, and page numbers. Also, if you retrieve something online and it has a URL, simply include a retrieval statement like the third example. In this case, the item was retrieved from the website sciencedirect.com. Consult Chapter 7 of the APA Manual for more variations on the publication field. To conclude, see if you remember the answers to the questions here. What are the 4 basic parts of a reference citation? What indentation should be used in the reference list? What paragraph spacing should you use in an APA paper? And if there's no author, what do you do? Thank you for watching this APA tutorial. And remember, any of the librarians on campus are happy to help you with any APA questions you may have.